One of the most comprehensive and well-reasoned letters in the entire New Testament is the book of Hebrews. And the only reason it exists is to provide an answer to a single question. When it's difficult to cling on, is Jesus worth it? Now let's get started. Hebrews' intended audience must be understood before we can comprehend what it says, because there is more to this letter than meets the eye. It was written to specific people in a specific situation under specific pressure. And when you know what that pressure was, every single argument the author makes becomes personal. It stops being theology. It starts being a lifeline. Nobody knows for certain who wrote the book of Hebrews. The honest answer is we don't know. What we do know is that whoever wrote it was one of the most gifted writers in the entire New Testament, and they knew the Hebrew scriptures in extraordinary depth. What we also know with confidence is who they were writing to. Jewish Christians, people who had grown up inside Judaism, who had known the Torah. He had been shaped by the temple, the priesthood, the festivals, and the sacrifices since childhood. It was their universe, their identity, and their whole conceptual framework for knowing God and how to get in touch with Him. After meeting Jesus, they came to trust in Him and joined the church, a brand new community, which in its early years was predominantly composed of Jewish believers who saw Jesus as the fulfillment of their tradition rather than as a break from it. They were now under strain. The letter seems to have been written around the 60s AD, when Roman animosity toward Christians was growing. When it started to get expensive to follow Jesus, real items, employment, connections, social status, and security. Take a look at what the author says in verses 32 to 34 of chapter 10. He's reminding them of their own past. Recall the times you spent enduring a terrible battle after receiving the light. You were occasionally subjected to insults and persecution in public. Other times, you stood alongside people who were so handled. You gladly accepted the seizure of your belongings while suffering with those incarcerated. Their belongings were seized. They were insulted in public. They witnessed friends being sent to prison. And because the faith was vibrant in those early days, they happily endured everything. It was a powerful conviction. The hope was new and instantaneous. However, it was in the past. The faith is not as new as it was at the time this letter was written. Both the cost and the hope have not decreased. If anything, it is increasing. Additionally, a few of these individuals are discreetly thinking about leaving. Furthermore, giving up religion completely is not their only option. Returning to Judaism, the temple, and the priesthood is the exit. And the sacrifice system, which would ease social pressure and make life simpler, because it was lawful under Roman law in a manner that Christianity was not. The reasoning makes sense to you. Jesus is the reason I started this. However, the old method is still in place. The temple remains intact. I might be able to ease back. Perhaps I may retain the essence of what Jesus was without having to be publicly.
Takes a seat and composes a letter, not a reprimanding or humiliating letter, but one that presents the most comprehensive, cautious, and sympathetic argument for a single conclusion. Jesus is superior. Not only excellent, not just one choice, but several. Better. Superior than anything that came before it. Superior to the angels. Better than the sacrifices. Better than the temple itself. Better than Moses. And better than the entire Levitical priesthood. Additionally, if
returning is not neutral if Jesus is superior. Returning entails leaving the actual object behind and returning to its shadow. The author really believes that these individuals have to comprehend their possessions before relinquishing them. One of the most magnificent sentences in the New Testament appears in the opening sentence of the letter. Hebrews 1, 1 through 2.
God used the prophets to communicate with our ancestors on numerous occasions and in a variety of methods in the past. However, in these final days, he has communicated with us through his Son, whom he designated as the heir to everything, and who also created the universe through the prophets of the past. The prophets are not being disregarded by the author. He is arranging them in order. Through Moses, Isaiah, and Ezekiel, there was a word.
They are all significant, genuine, and a part of the same narrative. However, the Son has now spoken. Furthermore, when the Son talks, it is not just one voice among many. The entire line was aiming for this voice, the most thorough, comprehensive, and unambiguous explanation of God's identity that has ever been provided. The author then argues that Jesus is superior to the angels for the first 2 chapters. Why would he have to argue that now? Why is the comparison even required?